Feedback. It doesn't always come in a formal review meeting. It often comes in those liminal speedy moments of normal work life, brief huddles, quick pings, short comments on a Google document. But if you're Harshit Belwal, it doesn't come at all. All his messages asking for feedback were left on scene, and his work felt very unseen and invisible. But this was not always the case. When he joined the CEO's office of an early stage startup in the EV battery space, it was with a lot of enthusiasm. It was his first startup job after a stint at Cognizant, something he looked forward to.
It was a pretty good job, not in terms of money, but in terms of knowledge. And that is what I was looking for. I wanted to learn under these people. It was in my domain, electric vehicles, EV charging. And I was continuously doing all kind of work on that job. I was marketing in the morning, product management in the evening. In middle of the afternoon, I was helping team in app development. So my role was not defined, but I was doing all kind of job.
His role kept changing every 2 months. It was a lot of recalibrating, and without feedback, he was starting to feel directionless and lost. His hypothesis was this: the company was going through a tough time. Everyone in the leadership was so busy putting out fires that feedback was deprioritized. It got so bad that he eventually had to quit within a year of joining, something he'd never thought he would do. So now his goal is to never put himself in a position like this ever again. In hindsight, he was telling me that sometimes he wondered if he had to take a share in the blame as well. Did he not know how to get people's time and ask for feedback? Was there anything else he could have done to get people interested in his work enough to give him meaningful feedback? Should he have been more relentless in asking? Ask just one more time? I am Aksha Chandrasekharan. This is The First 2 Years, a show where we ask and answer the toughest questions around work, especially in your early career. On today's show, how to ask for feedback in a way that people want to fit. While Harshit was sharing his problem with me, he ended the call with feedback about the podcast you're listening to right now. In fact, the reason I was speaking with him is because Harshit took the feedback survey we put out. Disclaimer, it was constructive criticism that he had for me. Even when we dress it up in cute words like constructive, you know it stings. That's why I wonder why Harshit wants feedback so bad. Usually, I'm one of those people who's hesitant in asking for it because you never know what you'll get. I wonder if this is why less and less people ask for feedback, if Harshit is really just an exception.
My recommendation would be that you guys have a very good, base of like people who are based out of good colleges. Okay. But the general population is not from great colleges. So they usually can't link up when I share them these, podcasts. They say that it's mostly like because they are from great colleges, so their problem is not our problem, the problems we face in big cities.
Harshit is from a small town 20 kilometers away from Dehradun, Hatal. It's on the border of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. His first brush with city life was when he moved to DIT University in Uttarakhand to do his mechanical engineering degree.
I was exposed to that urban environment and I was not used to that. And it was exciting for me, but deep down, I was not realizing where I was going. I was in an English medium school, but my English was, till 12th, I was not able to figure out how to use tenses. So you can understand.
His feedback for me was to bring more people like him. People who spoke like him, came from a similar background as him, and had the same problems as him. He had nothing against people from pedigreed institutions, he disclaimed. He just couldn't relate, he said. Well, he's right. We're not all as self-aware as we think. We all have blind spots. And this is something I hadn't even thought of. So I took Harshit's feedback after a lot of introspection and posed this question to someone who he would relate to, who had a similar journey as him.
As a bioengineer who knows nothing about SaaS, has no clue about how to get into the space, and I was also told by someone that you can never get placed in a company like Zoho, right? So from there to heading a marketing function for an AI startup is by itself is an accomplishment, and I think I'm grateful for that.
I retold Harshit's story in all its glorious details to Karthik Pasupati. He's the head of marketing at Prudent AI. Previously, he was with Zoho and Freshworks. He related to Harshit's trouble with the English language and coming from a non-pedigreed institution and making it work.
No, I mean it's completely valid, and there are times in your career where you will feel this way, right? Having a great manager who is also very plugged into everything that you're doing and giving you like pointed feedback is very very rare from my experience, and it's definitely valid. That he has this concern.
So Karthik, he wants to know if he could have done anything differently, right? That's what he's trying to ask.
So if you ask me, I'll tell you that you need to have two circles for feedback. One is the peer circle, which gives you critical feedback, so that you don't feel bad, right? Because it's your peers, and you can do the same to them as well. I think you'll feel equal, and you'll be very open to, understanding or getting what they say. And then you'll have the manager circle or the C-level circle, which will tell you like the signal, right? Red, yellow, green, right? What works and what doesn't work. So, or direction, right? But critical feedback should come from peer. I think if you design it that way, then you'll grow faster.
Karthik calls this having your own personal board of directors, with whom it's far easier to be radically transparent. If you receive constructive feedback from your peer, it doesn't make you wonder if your job is in jeopardy. You are far more likely to be receptive and less defensive. But what if I don't have enough people who join the org at the same time as me? Or what if I, like Harshit, was a single person team working with the CEO directly? It happens, but I was slightly concerned about sounding like these were contrived situations that I was just making up to ask a difficult question. But almost everyone I spoke to my surprise, for this episode acknowledged that these are real obstacles that, like Harshit, a lot of people encounter.
I think the first is just forgive that person, because it is very rarely out of choice that this person doesn't care, doesn't want to pay attention. If this person is not giving you feedback that you think is over a period of time, then they're most likely occupied with something else that's higher priority.
That's Balaji Ramachandran. He's the director of growth at Meesho. He was previously director of business at an academy, someone who left a stable career in management consulting for the love of startups. In his early career, he was somewhat in Harshit's shoes.
I worked with somebody who had a lot of people reporting to him. He was an extremely senior leader. Getting his time was complex because from when he came into office to when he left, everybody needed his time. And I was reporting to him, so I needed feedback from him. So feedback was just difficult to get purely because there was so much demand for his time. So then for me, it was look, he has to take breaks at some point. And during those times, I'm going to shamelessly catch him. So let's say I know he has to walk downstairs to his car. I know that he's going to eat lunch at some point. I know that he's at some point in the evening going to feel like I've been sitting too long. Maybe I need a walk. Catch him at those moments and ask him a couple of questions, get feedback.
Finding those interstices of time when his manager was free was the only way Balaji could ask for feedback. He had to time his requests. Someone else I spoke to said they'd always go to their manager in the first half of the day, so as to be able to set the tone for the conversation and do it with somewhat of a fresh mind. But this is something you need to observe and see how it plays out for you and your manager in your own office setup. But most people, to avoid all this hassle, just use the more convenient option of sharing the doc on Slack or email, and typically with a message that starts off by saying, I'm currently working on XYZ, and it usually ends with, I would love some feedback on this. We're all loving some feedback on so many documents on a day to day basis. The problem with this approach is that you could potentially get scene zoned. But if you want just tactical feedback, thoughts basis that one document, Slack or email could work. But if you want structured, thought through, meaningful feedback, then you might have to stick it out and ask for that uncomfortable conversation.
I think one way I have tried solving for it is more listing down what are things I think I'm doing well. And that usually provides a starting point. So, for instance, if I call out that we spoke last and you mentioned this, and since then I've been doing these, which of these have you seen? Which of these have you not seen? So it's usually easy to, instead of starting to form your own thought, to read something and agree or disagree with it. It becomes a thought starter. That person doesn't have to rack their brains in terms of instances. Instead, you're giving them instances and they'll tell you whether this is something they noticed or didn't notice. And that becomes easier to close feedback loops.
Most people tend to rely on people's memory to give them feedback. For them to recall the instances of all the good and bad work to give them something useful. In fact, on the contrary, this is when you get a lot of fluff. So here are 3 ways to detect fluff. 3 ways to know that you may have to reframe your questions to get better responses. First, generic advice that typically starts with, I usually recommend, I always look for this, I never like this. When someone starts talking about what they always or usually or never do, they are giving you generic fluff. Second, if you get future tense promises where they say, I will get back to you on that, I shall circle back to you on that, they probably never will. This you probably already knew. Third, the worst of all, you might get some hypothetical maybes after a long thinking nod. That might work. That maybe is the solution. You probably should go down that path. Try it out for yourself. All these responses are practically useless and a sign that they're trying to come up with something on the spot and that you'll have to try again another time to get something useful. Even if you time your request well and you make it a conversation and provide all the context that you need, what's the guarantee that it'll be good feedback? What if it's negative feedback that I've invited upon myself? You asked for tough feedback and you got it. Now, how do you handle it? Coming up next. One advice that always gets thrown around about getting over the fear of asking for feedback is don't take it personally. Well, this never works. If I tell you here's this specific thing I liked about your work, you are going to feel good about it and try and repeat it because they're applauding your best self. If I tell you here's the thing I didn't like, you're going to feel bad about it and try to see if you can fix it. They're attacking your worst self. Either ways, it feels personal, right? Which is one of the biggest reasons people like me find people like Harshit sort of like an alien species, pulling out all the stops to get feedback, right? These are the people who call feedback a gift, the gift of feedback. But like I said, you never know what you're going to get. So why do you want to put yourself through that? So I turned to Balaji for answers.
I was doing an internship, and I think this was the final day of the internship, so I was getting feedback. And it was a 30-minute call where the first 2 minutes were, all the things that I was doing well. And the remaining 20 minutes were specific examples as to what I did, what could have been better. And at the end of those 30 minutes, I was just feeling completely deflated, saying, oh my God, I've done nothing.
Balaji had made up his mind that this internship was not going to be one of those that turned into a pre-placement offer. But a few weeks later, to his complete surprise, or should I say shock, The company made him an offer. He was terribly confused. This has got to be a joke, he thought to himself, and he wrote back to the manager saying this.
Firstly, thank you so much for trusting and believing in me. But I just want to understand, like, what happened? How did I do 2 minutes of good work and 26 minutes of bad work, and then still end up with a PPO? And he's like, the reason I'm giving you feedback is because I think you'll improve. If I didn't think you would improve, I would not spend time giving you feedback. So you shouldn't be taking it personal. The question is, are you the best version you could be today? No, but I believe that you're capable. So the fact that I'm giving you feedback is a good thing. So don't worry about it.
This felt useful to me. Don't worry about it. Sounds trivial, but he's kind of right. I think we should worry less and less about whether the feedback is encouraging or discouraging, and more about how do I make sure that I get input that's going to allow me to learn from my strengths and overcome my weaknesses, right? Then it just becomes an input output mechanism and not a value judgment. It sounds really simple to say even now, but it's really hard to do.
So I joined as a technical writer at Zoho, and I used to go to my boss and my super boss every now and then, like 1 or 2 times a week for feedback. I write something, I just take it to them straight away. They'll be sitting at their desk. I just walk up to them and, hey, check it out. I've been doing this for a couple of times, and during one of those interactions, my boss was telling, I'm not paid to review your work. So he said, I hired you because I trust in your skills and ability to, do the job well.
Like you are saying, like that person saying, like, I'm not paid to review this, which is hard to hear and stuff.
I can see that you're struggling with that story.
Yeah, like how did you deal? I am just like, I would have cried, dude, if somebody told me that, what was going on in your mind when you heard that? How did it make you feel, right? I'm really
No,
trying.
it's actually good, right? Because you feel responsible for your own function, right? Whatever work that has been handed down to you, you feel like an owner, right? That's like the first.
If I were Karthik, I would have had an outsized reaction to those 7 words. Not paid to review your work. It isn't totally logical, but it totally happens. But what I thought would have been a tough pill to swallow, Karthik says he felt empowered. He focused on the words that followed after. I trust you. His manager was able to see that he didn't need tactical feedback. He needed reassurance to develop his own conviction and writing style, build his own confidence and make his own mistakes, and that's exactly what he needed, says Karthik in hindsight. You always want feedback conversations happening against a backdrop of feeling valued and feeling appreciated, and not feeling very existential and making you feel insecure in your job, which is how he viewed his experience. If you're still anything like me, even when you know all the best ways to position yourself for good feedback, how do you not feel like these criticisms are not global indictments, a reflection of you as a person? Then I have something for you. Before I go, I wanted to share something I read. I found it in a book by Sheila Heen. It's called Thanks for the Feedback. It's a concept called the second score. If, say, somebody gave you a 3.5 on a 10 for a project you did, but you took that criticism like a champ, then you give yourself a second score. You're an 8 on 10 for how you handled that. The second score shifts your focus away from the feedback and brings it closer to your response to the feedback. The interesting thing is, the more your second score improves, naturally your first score does too. Do let me know what you think about this tip. If you want to take the feedback form that Harshit did, the link is in the show notes. This episode was written, hosted, and produced by me, Akshay Chandrasekharan, and audio engineering by Rajiv CN. See you next Tuesday.